Detroit, 1965. The air in Cobo Hall was electric. 3,000 pairs of eyes fixed on the ring where Muhammad Ali, still called Cassius Clay by many who refused to acknowledge his new name, stood tall, shoulders squared, his usual confident smile playing across his face. At 23 years old, he was already the heavyweight champion of the world. But his controversial conversion to Islam and refusal to be drafted had made him as many enemies as admirers. In the front row sat Gerald Thornton, a 52-year-old factory worker whose son had been deployed to Vietnam 6 months earlier. His face was tight with barely contained rage as he watched the champion dance around the ring during the pre-fight press conference. "Draft dodger," he muttered under his breath, knuckles white as he gripped the barrier. The whiskey on his breath mixed with the cologne of wealthy spectators around him, a volatile combination, much like the tension in the room. If you're feeling something from this story already, no matter how small, don't leave without giving back. Comment and tell me where you're watching this video from, and subscribe to the channel. When Ali approached the edge of the ring to address the reporters, Thornton saw his opportunity. As the boxer leaned forward, microphones thrust toward his face, Thornton lunged forward. The security guards were a second too slow. In full view of the cameras, the flashes capturing every detail, Thornton spat directly into Ali's face. The glob of saliva landed on Ali's cheek, sliding down toward his mouth. The room froze. 3,000 breaths held simultaneously. Reporters' pens stopped mid-sentence. Even the bright camera flashes seemed to hesitate. Everyone expected explosion. Everyone knew Ali's quick temper matched his quick fists. They'd seen him verbally eviscerate opponents, reducing grown men to shells with just his words. What came next would become one of the most unexpected moments in sports history. Ali didn't move. Not a flinch, not a twitch, only his eyes registered the assault, narrowing slightly as the spittle dripped down his face. The silence stretched for 5 excruciating seconds. Then, with deliberate slowness, Ali reached for the white towel hanging on the ropes. He wiped his face clean, his gaze never leaving Thornton's. Then Muhammad Ali smiled, not his showman's smile, not the broad, gleaming grin he flashed for cameras. This was something different, something smaller, sadder, wiser. It transformed his face into a mask of dignity so powerful that several witnesses later claimed it changed their opinion of him forever. "I believe you've mistaken me for someone who would lower himself to your level, sir," Ali said, his voice carrying through the stunned silence. "I'd be happy to show you who I really am, if you have the courage to learn." Security rushed forward, grabbing Thornton by both arms. His face had drained of color. The bravado evaporated in the face of Ali's composure. As they dragged him away, Ali raised his hand. "Let him stay," Ali said. The words sent ripples of shock through the crowd. "If he's willing to listen as eagerly as he spits, we might both learn something today." The reporters exploded with questions. Flashbulbs popped like summer lightning. But Ali had already turned back to his entourage, whispering something to his trainer, Angelo Dundee, that made the older man nod with newfound respect. What nobody knew then was that Ali had recognized something in Thornton's eyes, something familiar. The same fear he'd seen in his own father's face when he'd announced his conversion to Islam. The same anger he'd witnessed in the eyes of white men who'd refused to serve him at restaurants despite his Olympic gold medal. And in that moment of recognition, Muhammad Ali made a decision that would affect not just Thornton's life, but his own legacy. The next morning, headlines across America blared the news of the incident. Ali turns the other cheek, announced the Detroit Free Press. The greatest show's greatest restraint, proclaimed the Chicago Defender. The story was on everyone's lips. how the most controversial athlete in America had responded to a public humiliation with grace that would have impressed Gandhi himself. But away from the cameras and reporters, something even more remarkable was happening. In a modest office at the back of Ali's hotel suite, his business manager Herbert Mohammed sat across from Gerald Thornton, whose hands trembled slightly as he signed the papers before him. "So I won't be charged with assault?" Thornton asked, his voice smaller than it had been the previous day. "That's correct," Herbert confirmed. "And on one condition. 24 hours ago, Thornton had been drowning his sorrows at a bar down the street, raging about the champion who refused to fight for his country while his son risked his life overseas. Now, he sat in that same champion's hotel suite. Having been personally invited by Ali himself, you will spend 1 week traveling with Mr. Ali," Herbert explained. "You will observe his training, his charity work, his prayers. You will eat at his table and speak with him directly. At the end of that week, you may say or write whatever you wish about him, good or bad." Thornton stared at the document. Why would he do this? Why not just press charges? A new voice answered from the doorway, "Because hatred comes from misunderstanding, and misunderstanding comes from distance." Ali stood there, dressed not in his flamboyant fight attire, but in a simple dark suit. He walked forward, extending his hand to the man who had spat in his face just 24 hours earlier. "My father taught me that you can't hate a man once you truly know him," Ali continued. "So I'm giving you the chance to know me, and perhaps I'll get the chance to know why a father would cross that line in front of thousands." Thornton hesitated before taking Ali's hand. The handshake was brief but firm. The older man couldn't maintain eye contact, his shame evident in the slump of his shoulders. "My son's unit was ambushed last month," Thornton said finally, his voice cracking. "3 of his friends died. When I saw you yesterday, all I could think was that you refused to be there with him." Ali nodded slowly. "I understand your anger better than you might think. Would you join me for breakfast? I'd like to tell you about my own father, and why I've made the choices I have." That breakfast lasted 3 hours. By the end, neither man had changed his fundamental beliefs, but something had shifted between them. Thornton later described it as the first time I ever really listened to someone I disagreed with. What followed was unprecedented. For 7 days, Gerald Thornton shadowed Muhammad Ali. He watched the champion rise before dawn for prayers, observed his punishing training regimen, and witnessed the hours Ali spent visiting children in Detroit's poorest neighborhoods. He saw the gentle way Ali spoke with the elderly, and the fierce intelligence with which he debated religious scholars and civil rights leaders. On the 3rd day, during a visit to a youth center in Detroit's Black Bottom neighborhood, 13-year-old Marcus Wilson asked Ali why he had forgiven "that white man who spit on you." The gym fell silent. All eyes moved between Ali and Thornton, who stood uncomfortably at the back of the room. Ali considered the question carefully. "I haven't forgiven him yet," he said finally, surprising everyone. "Forgiveness has to be earned through understanding. But I've stopped being angry with him, because anger only blinds us to the truth. Mr. Thornton and I are trying to find that truth together." That evening, in the privacy of Ali's hotel suite, Thornton received a phone call. His son had been wounded in an attack but would recover. Ali sat with him as he wept with relief, neither man speaking, the silence between them no longer hostile but shared. By the 5th day, something remarkable was happening to Gerald Thornton. The tight lines around his eyes had softened. The perpetual clench of his jaw had relaxed. Reporters who had been following the unusual story noted that Thornton had begun to stand differently, less hunched, more open. That afternoon, they visited the Detroit Memorial Hospital, where Ali had arranged a surprise for Thornton, a telephone call with his son Thomas, now recovering at a military hospital in Germany. What was meant to be a 5-minute courtesy call stretched to nearly an hour, with Ali eventually leaving the room to give father and son privacy. When Thornton emerged, his eyes were red, but his expression clearer than it had been all week. "He told my son he respected his courage," Thornton told Ali's entourage, his voice filled with wonder. "He disagrees with the war, but told Thomas he honors his commitment to what he believes in." That evening, something even more unexpected occurred. During Ali's regular press conference, a reporter asked Thornton what he had learned about the champion. Thornton stepped forward, cleared his throat, and spoke words no one had anticipated. "I was wrong," he said simply. "Not about everything. I still believe we need to be in Vietnam. But I was wrong about this man." He gestured toward Ali. "He's not what I thought. He's not a coward. He's standing for his beliefs the same way my son is standing for his." The admission made headlines across the country. "Spitter recants," announced the New York Post. "Enemy becomes ally," declared the Michigan Chronicle. What few people knew was that earlier that day, Ali and Thornton had visited the Great Lakes National Cemetery together. They had stood side by side at the graves of veterans, Ali paying his respects despite his opposition to the war. Later, they had prayed, Ali in his Muslim tradition, Thornton in his Christian one, each man honoring the other's faith while holding firm to his own. That night, in a small diner away from the press, the two men spoke not of politics or religion, but of their childhoods. Ali growing up in segregated Louisville, Thornton working the fields in rural Michigan from the age of 8. They discovered shared experiences of fathers with calloused hands and mothers who sacrificed everything for their children. They found common ground in their love of baseball and their worry about the future their children would inherit. "I still don't agree with your decision," Thornton admitted over coffee. "I wouldn't expect you to," Ali replied. "But do you understand it now?" Thornton nodded slowly. "I think I do, and that's more important than agreement." On the 7th day, the final day of their arrangement, Ali invited Thornton to join him for his morning run. At 5 a.m. Beachin, as dawn broke over Detroit, the 52-year-old factory worker struggled to keep pace with the world heavyweight champion. To the surprise of Ali's entourage, the boxer slowed his legendary footwork to match Thornton's labored steps. "Why are you doing this?" Thornton gasped as they jogged along the Detroit River. Why slow yourself down for me?" Ali's answer would be quoted in sports psychology books for decades to come. The true measure of a champion isn't how fast he can run. It's how willing he is to run alongside someone who can't match his pace without making them feel lesser for it. On the final evening of their week together, Ali invited the press to witness a ceremony he had arranged. In the same hall where Thornton had spat in his face, the two men now stood side by side. But this time, instead of hostility, there was something that looked remarkably like friendship between them. 7 days ago, in this very spot, Mr. Thornton expressed his anger toward me in a way that could have sparked more hatred. Ali addressed the crowd. "Today I want to thank him for teaching me something valuable." The reporters leaned forward, pens poised. "He taught me that courage comes in many forms. His son shows one kind of courage in Vietnam. I try to show another kind here at home, and Mr. Thornton has shown perhaps the rarest kind of all, the courage to reconsider deeply held beliefs." Ali then presented Thornton with a gift, a leather-bound copy of the Quran alongside a Bible. Inside the cover of each, he had written, "Different paths, same destination." Thornton, visibly moved, reached into his pocket and produced a worn photograph of his son in uniform. "Thomas asked me to give you this," he said. "He said to tell you that while he may not agree with your stance, he's fighting for your right to take it." The photo, showing a young man with Thornton's same determined jaw, became one of Ali's most treasured possessions. He kept it in his training room for the remainder of his career. In the years that followed, Gerald Thornton became an unlikely ambassador for understanding. He spoke at VFW halls across Michigan, telling veterans that it was possible to support the troops while respecting those who conscientiously objected. When Ali was stripped of his title for refusing the draft, Thornton wrote a letter to the Boxing Commission arguing for clemency. The two men maintained their connection, exchanging letters and occasional phone calls. When Thomas Thornton returned from Vietnam in 1967, Ali invited both father and son to attend his fight against Ernie Terrell. After Ali's victory, he gave his gloves to the young veteran, telling reporters, "He fought a tougher fight than I ever have." By 1971, when the Supreme Court unanimously overturned Ali's conviction for draft evasion, Gerald Thornton was in the courthouse, sitting behind Ali in silent support. And in 1996, when Ali lit the Olympic torch in Atlanta with hands shaking from Parkinson's disease, among the millions watching with tears in their eyes was a 73-year-old Gerald Thornton. The most profound legacy of their unlikely connection, however, emerged in 1975. Using their story as inspiration, Ali established the Common Ground Initiative, bringing together veterans and conscientious objectors for week-long retreats designed to foster understanding across the deepest of divides. The program continues to this day, having expanded to address racial, religious, and political divisions. When Gerald Thornton passed away in 2001, his obituary in the Detroit Free Press noted his unlikely friendship with Muhammad Ali as one of his proudest achievements. At his funeral, a floral arrangement arrived with a card bearing 5 simple words in Ali's handwriting: "Different paths, same destination." Historians and sociologists have since studied what became known as the Ali approach, the radical act of bringing one's fiercest critics into close proximity rather than pushing them away. The technique has been adopted by conflict resolution specialists from Northern Ireland to Rwanda, proving that Ali's impact extended far beyond the boxing ring. In his later years, battling Parkinson's disease, Ali was asked by a journalist which of his many achievements he was most proud of. His response, though slowed by his condition, was clear and deliberate. "People remember me winning fights against Liston, Foreman, Frazier," he said. But my best victory was winning over a man who hated everything I stood for, without throwing a single punch." The true measure of Muhammad Ali, the self-proclaimed greatest, may not have been his athletic prowess or his poetic boasts, but his understanding of a profound truth. Sometimes the most powerful response to hatred is not retribution, but relation. In choosing to know his enemy rather than punish him, Ali demonstrated a different kind of strength, the kind that changes not just moments, but minds and hearts. If you made it this far and felt every word, don't leave without subscribing. I tell these stories with my heart in my hand to reach people like you who feel, who get emotional, who truly live. If this really touched you, give back, comment, subscribe. Come be part of this family with me until the next video.